Douglas. Throughout the years, as a minister in the Baptist Church, as Premier of Saskatchewan, as national leader of the New Democratic Party, and now as a private MP, Tommy Douglas has put into words the hopes and dreams of men and women in all walks of life. When Tommy was a young man, he realized that power and resources in our society are controlled by those whose motives are largely selfish. He realized, too, that this misuse of power results in waste justice. That kind of society and that use of power didn't make sense to Tommy. It didn't make sense to J.S. Woodsworth or M.J. Coldwell, or to the thousands of farmers, workers, and unemployed who were victims of that system. What did make sense to Tommy, and to all the others who founded the Democratic Socialist movement in Canada, was that power and resources should be controlled democratically by all the people, and used for the benefit of all the people, building on the cornerstones of human dignity, social justice, cooperation, and citizen participation. Democratic socialism began to achieve reality in Saskatchewan under the leadership of Tommy Douglas. Because of Tommy and the people who shared his ideals, many of the most obvious problems have been solved. But we still have a long way to go before social democracy becomes a reality throughout Canada. That is why the two stories on this record are as relevant today as when first told by Tommy to audiences in crowded halls and schoolrooms throughout Saskatchewan when he was Premier. When Tommy speaks, his audience is captured and spellbound by his brilliant wit, his flawless oratorical style, and his deep commitment and sincerity. Most of all, Tommy Douglas gets complex and serious messages across by using simple ideas, by using humor, by using allegories, such as the timeless story of the cream separator.
I used to visit in farm homes, particularly around mealtime. And if I got in around dinner time, of course, everybody in the family was busy. They were unhitching the horses, they were pumping water, they were milking the cows, they were pitching down the hay and the oat sheaves. Somebody else was out gathering the eggs, somebody else was feeding the pigs and the chickens. Everybody had something to do. Even the youngsters were given the job doing something like just gathering eggs or feeding the chickens. And here I was, right off the city streets, you know. I didn't know what to do. I'd say, well, give me something to do. Well, nobody was going to trust this city boy with milking a good cow. They gave me the one job, you know, that anybody could do. They gave me the job of turning the handle on the old cream separator. Any of you ever turned the handle on the cream separator? Well, you know, it's quite an experience. I got to be pretty good at it. I got to the place where I could tell you how many verses of Onward Christian Soldiers it takes to put a pan of milk through this thing. And as I was turning the handle, and they were pouring in the milk, and I could see the cream coming out of one spout and the skim milk coming out of the other spout, one day it finally penetrated my thick Scotch head. This cream separator is exactly like our economic system. Here are the primary producers, the farmers and the fishermen and the loggers. They're pouring in the milk. And here are the workers. Whether they work on the railroad or go down to the mines or sail ships or work in a store or a bank or teach school, clerk in the store, work in a hospital, they're the people whose services make the economy go round, and they're turning the handle. So here you have it. Primary producer puts in the milk. People who work with hand and brain turn the handle. And then I thought, but there's another fellow here somewhere. There's a fellow who owns this cream separator. And he's sitting on a stool with the cream spout in his mouth. And the primary producer and the worker, they take turns on the skim milk spout. And they don't like skim milk. Nobody likes skim milk. And they blame it on each other. And the worker says, if those farmers and fishermen, you know, would work a little harder, Well, I wouldn't be drinking this skim milk. And the fishermen and the farmers say, if those workers didn't demand a 40-hour week, didn't want such high wages, I wouldn't have to live on this blue milk. But you know, they're both wrong. The farmers and the fishermen have produced so much that we don't know what to do with it. We've got surpluses of foodstuffs. And the workers, they've produced so well that today nearly 500,000 of them are unemployed. The fault isn't with the worker, it isn't with the primary producer. The fault is with this machine. This machine was built to give skim milk to the worker and the primary producer, and to give cream to the corporate elite. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't always do that. Because every once in a while, this little fellow sitting on the stool with the cream spout in his mouth gets indigestion. And he says, boys, stop the machine, we got a recession. He says to the worker, you're laid off, you can go on unemployment insurance. And after that, on welfare. And he says to the farmers and the fishermen, you know, we don't need your stuff, take it back home. Then he sits for a while. Indigestion gets better. He burps a couple of times. Says, all right, boys, start the machine. Happy days are here again. Cream for me and skim milk for both of you. Now, what the Democratic Socialist Party have been saying to Canadians for a long time is that the time has come in this land of ours for the worker and the primary producer to get their hands on the regulator of the machine so that it begins to produce homogenized milk in which everybody will get a little cream.
Tells us how people can change that system through democratic and socialist action.
It's a story of a place called Mouseland. Mouseland was a place where all the little mice lived and played and were born and died. And they lived much as you and I do. They even had a parliament. And every 4 years they had an election. They used to walk to the polls and cast their ballots. Some of them even got a ride to the polls. Got a ride for the next 4 years afterwards, too. Just like you and me. And every time on election day, all the little mice used to go to the ballot box and they used to elect a government. A government made up of big, fat, black cats. Now, if you think it's strange that mice should elect a government made up of cats, you just look at the history of Canada for the last 90 years, and maybe you'll see that they weren't any stupider than we are. Now, I'm not saying anything against the cats. They were nice fellows. They conducted the government with dignity. They passed good laws. That is, laws that were good for cats. But the laws that were good for cats weren't very good for mice. One of the laws said that mouse holes had to be big enough so a cat could get his paw in. Another law said that mice could only travel at certain speeds so that a cat could get his breakfast without too much physical effort. All the laws were good laws for cats, but they were hard on the mice. And life was getting harder and harder. And when the mice couldn't put up with it anymore, they decided something had to be done about it. So they went en masse to the polls. They voted the black cats out. And they put in the white cats. Now the white cats had put up a terrific campaign. They said all that Mouseland needs is more vision. They said the trouble with Mouseland is those round mouse holes we've got. If you put us in, we'll establish square mouse holes. And they did. And the square mouse holes were twice as big as the round mouse holes. And now the cat could get both his paws in. And life was tougher than ever. And when they couldn't take that anymore, they voted the white cats out and put the black ones in again. And then they went back to the white cats and then to the black cats. They even tried half black cats and half white cats. And they called that coalition. They even got one government made up of cats with spots on them. They were cats that tried to make a noise like a mouse, but they ate like a cat. You see, my friends, the trouble wasn't with the color of the cats. The trouble was that they were cats. And because they were cats, they naturally looked after cats instead of mice. Who had an idea, little fellow with an idea. And he said to the other mice, look, fellas, why do we keep on electing a government made up of cats? Why don't we elect a government made up of mice? Oh, he said he's a Bolshevik. Lock him up. So they put him in jail. But I want to remind you that you can lock up a mouse or a man, but you can't lock up an idea.